was walking through my friendly local game store, taking a look at their used shelf, and I stumbled across these. Space Marine infiltrators and a captain in Phobos armor. And I don't know what it is about them, but I had to have them. Usually, pre-owned models are primed and maybe base coated, but these guys are done. Someone painted these guys with washes and highlights and probably gamed with these. They had a whole life before reaching me, and when I saw them on the used shelf, it was like a meet cute in a romance movie. We caught each other's eyes and there was sparks flying. The previous owner was clearly a very good painter, and they had a lot of moxie. I love the decisions they made. Yellow and black, it looks fantastic. I love the bases, or the idea of the bases. They didn't put them on a regular forest or an urban environment. They went with an alien coastline. And I just love when people commit to weird ideas. These models are mine now, but I don't want to change them. I just want to finish them. I just want to make them everything they can be. I've been inspired, and I want to see what happens. To be able to add to their existing greatness, I need to get these guys off of their bases. Some of them ripped away clean, but some I had to really wrench, and one guy lost his foot. They were probably assembled with plastic glue, so some of them took the bases with them. I used my Dremel tool to grind away the plastic and cork so I could start fresh, getting them onto some paint handles. On a few of these guys, there were some mold lines, decently hidden by the paint job, but I want them clean. So I used this opportunity to fix any mistakes. And speaking of mistakes, it looks like the previous owner had some trouble with the white spray primer. Each of these Marines has one half that is smooth and one half that's gritty. This happens to me too. I think it happens when you spray in direct sunlight. The paint dries in the air and then lands on the minis. White spray paint is really temperamental. I can't have any models in my collection without drilled barrels. I used my hobby knife to give myself a dent and then drilled out the barrels and then drilled a little round hole in the side of each bolter barrel. I've got these guys all cleaned up and ready to go, and I'm really excited to start painting on top and just taking these guys up a notch. I want to work on the yellow, and I really like what the previous owner did with the yellow. I think it's just a yellow base coat with Reikland flesh shade on top, but it's really smart because instead of brown, which would kind of desaturated the yellow, I feel like the Reikland flesh shade turns into a lovely orange in all the cracks and crevices, and I really want to keep that going. It's strange working on models that someone else painted. It's hard to know where to start. I took some warm white paint and started layering on highlights, picking some spots on the model to brighten up. This is more of an experiment. It's dramatically desaturating the yellow, but I want to see how far I can push the highlights. I made up an orangey color that I put around the skull and crossbone chest emblem and reinforced the shadows around his neck and armpits. And then I glazed on a bright saturated yellow over the warm white. This darkened down the warm white and brought back the saturation, which was my goal. Although it does look a little like I just left it alone, so I came back in with my warm white and did some final highlights, edge highlighting around his collar, chest, and adding some spots to his helmet. I think I'm onto something with his chest. The next thing I tried was adding more Reikland flesh shade to the underside of his arms and the inside of his legs. Warm white is as high as I can push the highlights, so making the recesses darker will help me get that dramatic contrast I'm looking for. Now that I've reinforced my shadows, I decided not to go for my base coat yellow, but instead doing my spot highlights of the warm white, so I can see both ends of my yellow spectrum. Then I went in with my yellow paint thinned down and glazed this over both the orange and the warm white, doing a few layers until I had made a soft transition that let the majority of each armor panel be my base yellow. I've been staring at this guy for a few hours and he doesn't feel that different to me, but when I hold him up to one of the OG paint jobs, I can really see the difference. Now that I know what I'm doing, I can create a recipe. Step 1 is fixing any mistakes and any damaged spots with the base yellow and then applying my orange shadows. After that, a generous splash of Reikland flesh shade everywhere, applying my warm white highlights and then glazing over these with yellow until only a little bit of the orange and the white are showing through, on the darkest and brightest spots. The yellow looks so good. I don't like to say that models are bad, because even if I don't like a model, like I don't like the incursors and infiltrators, I know in the back of my mind that one day I'll see the perfect combinations of colors, the perfect paint job that makes me fall in love with it. Like, these are how they're meant to be painted. It just looks fantastic. And I've painted a bunch for my Black Templar army. And I did it. I put my Black Templar recipe on them and I swapped the heads with normal intercessor heads and they look fine, but they don't look at all special. These guys look special. All the things I didn't like, their weird little fish mouths and their weak ankles, this color scheme highlights them, but it just works. It works so well. And I guess in the age of the detachment, it doesn't really matter what color you paint your guys. If Phobos things look better in yellow than black, I don't know. Maybe I paint them yellow. Maybe I have a detachment of sides from the Emperor who are helping out the Black Templar in my battles. There's no actual rules. I can do whatever I want. and I'm really excited about these guys. I don't paint much yellow, but these guys' armor has been a really fun adventure into the yellow spectrum. I'll definitely keep experimenting, but now it's time for the black armor. I put black paint on the models and discovered that what is on these guys is not actually black paint. It's a slightly cold gray color, so I mixed some blue paint into my black, and this made for a much better match for what was originally on the models. And then I base coated over all the existing gray edge highlights so I could apply my own. Black is a tricky color to highlight. It takes a lot of layers to get a smooth transition, so I decided to let the airbrush do the work for me, doing dots on each of their shoulder pads, bolters, and even did a little poof on each of their waists. Then I made up my own highlight color, making a mid-tone gray, and dry brushed this on. I want to keep the highlights somewhat dark so that the yellow is the only thing that is bright white on it. After that, I mixed Null Oil and Contrast Black Templar together to make a black wash, and I put this over the black, darkening down the blue so that there's a crazy contrast between the bright yellow and the dark armor and weapons. I did just a few edge highlights to the black with a mid-tone gray, bringing attention to some of the smaller details, like the ribbing on their undersuit, skull and crossbones, and the scopes of their bolters. Now for those pouches. The contrast paint the previous owner used didn't do much contrasting. I wonder if it was applied right over the yellow base coat. I took a dark brown and glazed it over the bottom half of each pouch, and then mixed in some white paint to get a tan color and edge highlighted the pouches. After that, I made some scratchy edge highlights to each corner to create a different texture than the smoothness of the armor. Now that's all the big elements finished, it's time to knock out some of the specific details, like the captain's silver servo skull and jewelry, his bolt pistol, and that one guy who's not wearing the top half of his helmet. For the eye lenses, these were never painted before, so I get to make a decision. I think blue will be the most striking color next to the yellow, and there's a tinge of blue in the black armor. On the Servo Skull's iPad, I painted a tiny grid and made up some shapes as if he's surveying the land and getting it ready for the rest of the Space Marines to drop pod in. Now the only thing left is the cape, but I don't want to paint the cape just yet. I don't know exactly what color the base will be. The previous bases were purple painted cork and some kind of indigo goo. Very simple, so I have to make a lot of decisions of what this environment really looks like. That yellow glows like the sun. I love my Black Templar, but they're very dark, and so it helps to have them right up against your eye if you really want to see the details. These guys look good from across the table, and that's probably why they caught my eye in the secondhand shelf. That and the really cool bases. And today's sponsor is gonna help out with those bases. Epic Basing is the one-stop shop to make your bases truly epic. I love basing my miniatures, and Epic Basing's huge catalog of bits gives me the freedom to build dynamic scenes that I couldn't make otherwise. They have a huge catalog of bits from many different genres. I use their bits on just about every single model I make, and it gives me the freedom to set my minis in whatever universe I want. Barren wastelands, battlefield bones and demon stone. A whimsical meadow, bring on the pointy mushrooms. A spooky forest, barkwood trees and barkwood branches let me bring the vision in my head to life. And the bits are just that, bits. They don't have to go on the base. I've used these bits to spice up my miniatures, giving my Black Templar Dreadnoughts a lovely bouquet of candles and torches. What makes Epic Basing bits so epic is to give you another way to personalize your miniatures. Sprinkle them however you want and in different combinations on your bases to make some truly epic designs that complement your minis perfectly. All of these epic bits are available as STLs for you to print yourself. And don't worry if you don't have a 3D printer, the folks over at Epic Basing have you covered. They have their bits available to purchase physically from their website. These bits are a game changer when it comes to getting your minis looking their best. Epic Basing is giving the first 100 of our viewers 13% off when they shop with the code EonsOfBits13. Check them out and take your wargaming bases to the next level. I have a lot of respect for the previous owner because they did weird alien bases, and that's hard to do. I have thousands of minis and almost all of them stand on like generic Earth, generic desert, or generic urban battlefields because it's pretty easy to do. But weird alien stuff, an alien coastline, that's a challenge. I tore off some cork and glued it down to the base as my first layer of seaside rocks. I trimmed up the generic battlefield rubble tactical rock that the captain is standing on and glued him down to the cork so I know exactly where his feet will be. I added some milliput and started squishing in some mossy rocks epic basing bits into it. Once these are purple, they'll help sell a weird alien coastline with alien barnacles growing on them. I applied more milliput and then using a damp piece of cork pressed in some texture to match the existing cork. And I also added alien fungus bits, like a little critter is latched onto the rocks. On the other Marines, I made them standing on cork and milliput towers, making them a little shorter than the Phobos captain, as we all know the importance in 40k is determined by height. I loaded up as many epic basing bits as I could and used milliput to fill in the gaps to make my coastline rocks. Now for painting. I glued down the Marines so I could get them perfectly posed on the bases, but that means it's going to be a little tricky to paint them. I mixed purple paint and brush on primer together and gave every base a big wet coat, and now that I have a color, I put this over the sergeant's camel cloak as well. I like when the cloaks match the environment. Looking at the new versus the old side by side, it's definitely the same, just different execution. I dry brushed some lighter pink over the bases to bring out the texture and mixed up a lighter shade to highlight some of the details in the epic basing bits. My rocks were looking a little flat, so I put purple wash over everything and then reapplied my highlights. I want all the different elements on the base to be the same color to help the Marines stand out on top of them and to make it feel more alien. An entirely purple ecosystem that couldn't possibly be mistaken for Earth. I varnished everything with a satin varnish, and it was time to get wet and wild with the water. And you know what else gets wet and wild? That's right, our Patreon. This month we have the mining colony, terrain, and vehicles. Utilitarian machines that are more than they appear. Designed to ride across the landscape, firing stolen weapons, or tunneling underneath to lay traps. And the mines and containers make for thematic and useful terrain. The colony is ready to uprise. I started out by base coating the ground with black paint so my clear water doesn't end up looking purple. Then I took some UV resin and globbed it over the base, pushing it around with a toothpick and then locking it in place with my UV lamp. It's the right look and consistency, but the wrong color, an easy fix. I took my Badger Minotaur Ghost Tint blue paint and put this on top. The paint is clear and glossy, and this will transform the glass-like water into a deep indigo sea. Now to add some texture, I used Vallejo water texture to create an uneven surface, loading it up and then pushing it around with blasts of air from my airbrush to get a convincing water look. This stuff dries crystal clear, so the indigo will show through once it's dried. My yellow boys are all done! And really, they didn't change. Like, nothing about them actually changed. I just kind of gave them a little zhuzh, a little bit of cleanup, but I always saw them looking like this. Like, it reminds me of my old school Space Marines. Like, to me, they're awesome. They're super cool. I see them stomping across the battlefield as big, imposing Space Marines, but really, they're 3 wimpy pieces of plastic to make up a very, very tiny Space Marine. It was a similar thing with these guys. Like, they were fine before, totally tabletop ready, looked pretty darn good, but now I see in front of me exactly what I saw in my head. Let's do a little comparing and contrasting. The old guys were great. I often see models on Facebook or Instagram and try to achieve the same paint job so that my models can look like that too. It was a new experience to actually have the cool paint job in my hands and work on top of it. I'm really happy to have these guys in my collection and a new appreciation for Phobos Space Marines. With the right color scheme, it seems like any model can be a banger, except the Storm Speeder. Maybe one day I'll see a paint job that fixes that model, but I doubt it. Until then, I'll be playing with my golden boys, trekking across an alien planet, and who knows, these models might not always belong to me either. Maybe they'll end up back at the secondhand shelf, ready for the next person to add to them.